Not every story can deliver the perfect plot twist, no matter which medium of entertainment you're speaking about, and the same is true for video games. While some games can deliver twists in the most unexpected fashion, with the perfect setup and in a manner that takes you by surprise but still makes sense, there are others that telegraph their huge shocking twists a bit too much or present possible scenarios well ahead of time so that when the twist comes, it ends up feeling predictable. In this video, we'll be taking a look at 15 such plot twists in video games. Obviously, there will be spoilers ahead for every game that we speak about, so if we start talking about a game that you do not want spoiled, go ahead and skip to the next entry. Batman: Arkham Knight. Perhaps the most predictable plot twist in a game over the last few years, easily predictable if you've been paying even the slightest bit of attention to anything that was going on in the game, and painfully obvious if you have any prior knowledge from the comics about Batman and his ward, Jason Todd. From his arc for seeking revenge against Batman to his supposed death being too similar to previous stories we've seen in Batman media, to Rocksteady themselves tipping their hand a bit too much with pre-release marketing, the reveal that the former Robin was now the crazed Arkham Knight took no one by surprise. Uncharted 4. From the moment Sam Drake came in, he set off alarm bells in our heads. His story about Hector Alcazar and why he so desperately needed to find Avery's treasure reeked of lies, especially since Alcazar barely even made real appearances other than when Sam spoke of him that one time. And though the game certainly deserves props for trying to sell Sam's lies with an entire playable flashback section to support them, when it was finally revealed that the entire story was just a huge fabrication to get Nate roped into another treasure hunt, we cannot say that we were all too surprised. Resident Evil 5. Jill being the hooded figure in Resident Evil 5 is perhaps one of the most predictable reveals we've ever seen in a game. For starters, there's no way Jill Valentine was going to die the way that the game claimed that she did, not without a lot more fanfare than that. Then there was her mysteriously empty container. Then there was the fact that Capcom themselves made it abundantly obvious with trailers for the game before the game was even released. It's hard to imagine anyone being surprised by that reveal. Until Dawn. The psycho masked killer in Until Dawn is far from the only threat to contend with there being a lot of other forces at play, but at least during the beginning of the game, he's still a pretty big deal. And it's kind of obvious from pretty early on that Josh is the man behind the mask. The guy who invited you to this haunted cabin and looks and talks all creepy is the one responsible for all the weird stuff going on? Well, who could have thought? Metal Gear Solid 5. The entire reveal that Venom Snake was not the real big boss at all is something that remains a contentious matter of debate for Metal Gear fans to this day and probably always will. But regardless of how well it was or wasn't done, there's no denying that it actually wasn't that hard to see coming. Literally, the entire game was littered with overtly obvious clues, from the man on fire refusing to kill Venom Snake, to the mammal pod scene, to the first Paz flashback, to your first meeting with Emmerich, to so much more. We all knew all along that something fishy was going on. Life is Strange. Life is Strange is, first and foremost, the story of the friendship between Max and Chloe, after which it is a story of Max's mysterious supernatural powers. But another very interesting subplot in the game is about Chloe's friend, Rachel Amber, what happened to her and why it happened to her. Rachel's disappearance, and then later another student who suffers a similar fate, is a driving mystery for a large section of the game. But the ultimate reveal that the photography teacher Jefferson is the one responsible for all of it doesn't come as much of a shock. Persona 5. Was anyone really surprised when it was revealed that Akechi was the person who had been traversing the metaverse as the Black Masked Assassin all along? The game was far too generous with hints for the same, while the pre-release marketing for the game itself also made it fairly obvious, especially when you looked at it in retrospect while playing the game. Of course, one might argue that the Akechi twist wasn't the real twist at all, and the real twist only came with the eventual Igor reveal, which is fair enough. Persona 4. Persona 4's murder mystery setup is an incredibly engaging setup for its plot, or for the first two-thirds of it at any rate. And while in the beginning hours, it's definitely not easy to point at a single character being the obvious suspect, as time goes on it becomes plainly obvious that there's no choice more obvious than Adachi. Persona 4 goes out of its way to portray him as the bumbling and inept, harmless guy who couldn't hurt a soul if he wanted to. But then again, it goes a bit too out of its way to do that. After a while, it becomes pretty plain to see that the game is going for a shocking reveal that the useless guy you underestimated was the bad guy all along, which definitely isn't the most original sort of plot twist. Final Fantasy X. Seymour being the bad guy in Final Fantasy X is perhaps the most obvious reveal of all time, something you can see coming as soon as you first lay eyes on the guy. Wait a second, Final Fantasy X? You mean to tell me that this character who just made an appearance and looks very important and was being all wise and nice and has this really weird haircut is actually the villain? No way! I've never seen this kind of plot twist ever in my life. XENOBLADE Chronicles 2. There's a lot in XENOBLADE Chronicles 2 that can truly take you by surprise, and the game deserves full credit for that. But in some areas, the game went for genre tropes that you could see coming a mile off. For instance, the fact that Amalthus was the bad guy all along. Here's this wise-looking leader who seems like he wants nothing but global peace, only for the game to reveal that that's not what he really wants at all. It's the sort of thing we've seen in games and other media countless times before. Red Dead Redemption 2. The fact that Micah is the rat in Dutch's gang and had been informing on them to the Pinkertons is something that almost doesn't feel like a twist a lot of the time. It's that predictable. Red Dead Redemption 2 throws the red herring of Molly and her false claims of being the informant at you, but even in spite of that, it doesn't take you long to figure out that the real informant probably isn't dead. And really, by that point, there's only one real person in the entire game who can fit the bill. Only one character who's deplorable enough to do that sort of thing. Good old Micah. Pokemon X and Y. Calling a plot twist in a Pokemon game predictable is like saying there's too many bugs in an Elder Scrolls game. Of course, it's predictable. For those who have experience with previous Pokemon games and how it's handled its villainous teams and their leaders, the reveal that Lysander was the leader was not even a reveal. It was an inevitability that you knew about the moment Lysander first appeared. But even if you had no experience with Pokemon, it was still obvious. Here's an imposing man speaking about wanting to create a more beautiful world, and here's this villainous organization wanting to destroy humanity. It's not hard to connect those dots. Assassin's Creed Odyssey. While Assassin's Creed Odyssey gives a player the choice to play as either Cassandra or Alexios, whichever character you don't play as ends up being an important role in the story as well, as a member of the Cult of Cosmos. Except the reveal that your sibling, who was believed to be dead, is actually their enforcer who is called Deimos, isn't all that surprising. The game makes it a point to remind you every step of the way until the reveal happens that your sibling is dead, while the identity of Deimos is also kept conspicuously secret. It's not hard to put two and two together. Fallout 4. Fallout 4 throws a pretty big twist at you when it reveals that Sean, the son you've been looking for, is actually the man called Father, the leader of the Institute. Well, at least it tries to at any rate. If there's one thing that most, if not all, Fallout 4 players can agree on, it's that the entire reveal was painfully telegraphed, and it had become obvious long before it actually happened. There's also the fact that huge chunks of the game also ended up making no sense because of it, but that's a discussion for another day. Dead Space. Dead Space is an absolutely incredible game that is dripping with proper horror and intense atmosphere, but even it is not perfect. For instance, the reveal that Isaac's girlfriend Nicole had actually been dead all along and was just a hallucination was one that was pretty easily predictable. From the weird way that she talked about wanting to be made whole again, to the obvious hints the game threw at you about her connections to the marker symbols, by the time it was revealed that Nicole had been a hallucination, all of us had probably already figured it out. And that about does it for this video. If you enjoyed what you watched and want to see more from Gaming Bolt, you can always hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell icon next to it. That way you will never miss any of our videos.